Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first series of 3 Sunday night events focused on the D.C. mayor's race. We're calling these the UnForums. I'm Mark C. I gotta look at my notes for this. I'm Mark Segraves with NBC4, DC 50 on Sunday mornings at 10, and every day on 99.1 FM, CBS's new all-news radio station. So there's plenty of opportunity to catch my act during the week. We're calling these the UnForums because, unlike the normal debates, we're just having the candidates here individually, one at a time, to talk about the general topic of income inequality. And so here's how this evening and the future evenings will proceed. In a few minutes, Andy and I will begin our conversation for about 45 minutes. It'll be a one-on-one conversation about his thoughts on income inequality and how he as mayor would address issues regarding jobs, education, housing, and the safety net for the District of Columbia. Then we're going to take a short break, give you a quick opportunity to say hello, meet Mr. Shallal, and then we'll get Tommy Wells in here, and we'll do the whole thing over again. I have, along with the organizers, prepared a series of questions and topics for this evening. So unlike other forums, we will not be taking any questions from the audience. So there's that. The original lineup, I know many of you on your tickets, it said Muriel Bowser tonight. You'll just have to live with disappointment on that one. Councilmember Bowser.
She's doing the red carpet tonight.
She is
sure.
otherwise engaged, and on Friday told the organizer she was not going to be able to make it. And we very much appreciate Mr. Shallal graciously stepping in at the last moment and accommodating our schedule. For the next 2 Sundays, next Sunday, March 9th, it will be Council members Vincent Orange and Jack Evans, and that discussion will be led by Mark Fisher from the Washington Post. And then on March 16th, that is in flux, shall we say. That is a fluid situation which we hope to have resolved by the 16th.
What's making it fluid? Is the mayor, maybe the mayor might get indicted by them? Is that?
No, I believe it's
I thought you knew something we didn't.
No, I doubt that. So we want to thank UDC Law, particularly Dean Shelley Broderick, for making the room and the facility available to us. As I said before we started, this is all being videotaped, and UDC's YouTube channel will have it. We want to thank the 20 co-sponsoring organizations, not individually, thank goodness, but the Fair Budget Coalition, DC Appleseed, Walter Smith is here, of course, and the DC Fiscal Policy Institute, which is well represented here tonight. Now, gosh, let me get a drink here. About our special focus tonight, income inequality.
So you brought the richest guy in the race to be on income equality. Is that why?
We'll get to that.
You look at, oh boy, I'm out of here.
The other night, you were the only candidate who would answer the question of what you were worth. The other candidates graciously declined to note their net worth. So, but income inequality, the gap between economic power of the highest and lowest earners has grown wider in the United States, especially in our biggest cities, and the district is at the top of the pack. A study soon to be released by the DC Fiscal Policy Institute shows the gap continues to grow. While the district's economy has led to economic growth and prosperity for many in the middle and higher rungs of the ladder, residents on the bottom income scale largely are being left behind. A 2010 report from the DC Fiscal Policy Institute found that the average income among the top 5% households in DC, you want to take a shot at this? You have any idea what that is?
Top income,
top 5%?
the 5% would be 400,000.
473. It was the highest among the 50 United States. The poorest DC households, by contrast, those in the bottom fifth income had an average
of $29.
$9,100. In DC, the average income top fifth is 29 times that of the income at the bottom. A city in which the well-to-do continue to do better and the poor continue to do worse. It impacts the academic success of public schools, as the district may struggle to create and maintain mixed-income school environments that produce better outcomes for low-income kids, and it limits the tax base from which to sustain revenues necessary for essential city services, and it may fail to produce housing in neighborhoods accessible to low and moderate income workers and their families. So those who move up or down the income ladder may ultimately have no choice but to move out. So with that, man, I'm so glad to be through that. So with that, please welcome candidate for mayor, Andy Shallal. Well, you mentioned it, you brought it up, you're the richest guy out there. Right? As far as
Actually,
we know,
you said, yeah, they haven't declared their,
as
their
far
number.
as we know, you're by all accounts a successful businessman with several businesses in town. When you're going about your business platform, do you take into consideration the income gap that you are so well aware of, how much money you make compared to the rest of the residents of the District of Columbia?
Well, I think oftentimes I bring it up because I think it shows that you can actually do good business and still do well. I think that's an important element because oftentimes we're told that if you pay well and if you have good benefits and if you have a business that is socially conscious, that or somehow that's not workable in this city, and that's just not true. So I speak about it in a sense that you can actually do very well in the city and still do well by others.
Do you think it's cost you money?
Oh, of course it will cost you money. Yeah, I mean,
Can you name a specific example?
sure. I mean, health insurance. We pay for health insurance for our staff. We pay every month. Our health insurance bill is somewhere around $60,000
For how many employees?
for approximately 300 employees.
And how about a time where it actually paid off for you?
It pays off for me every day. I'm here. I'm able to do everything I want to do. Have a good staff that's minding the shop. So I get them involved at many different levels. Some through ownership and some through benefits.
So what is the gap in your company between you and, say, the highest next earning employee in your company?
About 6 times.
And how about the lowest earning employee?
About 16 times.
So does somebody working for you have an opportunity to become a millionaire?
Well, I'm not sure if that's possible, but it is possible. Each one of my top management employees, in fact, my operations director, who makes $160,000 a year, started out as a dishwasher. That's not something that many people
Now,
can
could you
say.
clear that person that you were going to tout back? Because you said that
I didn't say their
before.
name.
I think we could probably figure out. I'm sure people back at Busboys and Poets know who you're talking
Yeah,
about.
but you mean, would he care if people know how
Right.
much he made?
Yeah.
I don't know. We're fairly transparent about that. I mean, it's not like we post it up somewhere, but people know. Look, there's no secrets in business, okay? I know for a fact that whatever happens in my shop, everybody knows what's going on. As much as we try to keep it private, people know immediately. The minute somebody gets a raise, everybody knows that person gets a raise, and everybody else wants one too. So we've learned to be as open as possible about it. And all of my top management team, actually, all of my top management team, which make close to $100,000, have all started as servers, bartenders, bussers, cooks. So, and many of them, I mean, some of them have been with me for, a few years, but many of them have been with me for 15 to 20 years.
The Washington Post editorialized that your main focus, I'm going to grab a quote here, seems to decry the economic forces that have contributed to your business's success. Muriel Bowser, we know, called you a rich socialist. What do you think about that?
I'm so over the Washington Post, I have to tell you.
I'm sorry?
I'm just over the Washington
Paul
Post.
McCarthy just walked in, so I'm sure you want
hi.
to hear this.
Paul McCarthy, how you doing? But it's interesting. I found it odd for them to even say that, is the fact that just because you've done well, you can't speak on behalf of others that haven't. Doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I think that's the whole point of why I'm running, because there are people that are not at the table. And I think it's our duty, our responsibility to be the voice for those that cannot be at the table for whatever reason. Years ago I worked with a school board, and I was trying to get a diversity training program in the school system. And I remember one of the assistant superintendents, there was an issue that happened where there was an event that had all kinds of stereotypes in it. The World Weight Federation Wrestling, they have, how they have like these characters. And the World Weight Federation Wrestling had come to one of the schools to do a fundraiser. And they had all these characters. They had like short people fighting each other, they had women mud wrestling, they had a black guy and a white guy, fighting it out, and they had an Arab guy that was fighting this other guy. And it was brought up to my attention, and I tried to stop it. And the superintendent said, "Why are you trying to stop it?" I said, "Well, it has stereotypes. I'm an Arab. I'm offended by that. I'm offended by the other things." So she said that we'll take away the Arab, but you have no business speaking on behalf of the other groups. And I said, that doesn't make any sense. Just because you're not handicapped doesn't mean you can't speak on behalf of handicapped people. Just because you're not black, you can't speak on behalf of people that are oppressed oftentimes, who are black in the city. Or just because, I just find it odd that they would say that. I didn't like the comment.
Let me stay a little bit with jobs and busboys and poets. What's the number one reason someone doesn't get hired at busboys? And I'm just trying to figure out, as an employer, when you see people come to you, what's the number one reason that you find that you have to say no to somebody?
Well, what makes somebody not qualified is the inability to fill out an application, first of all. Oftentimes, it makes it really difficult, especially if they're...
And what percentage of applications you get that
big.
it's not legible?
I mean, that really highlighted to me the disparity in the city, the fact that we have such a high level of illiteracy. Even startup jobs, baseline jobs like servers or people that have to communicate with customers and have to write things. Out of every job that we fill, we get maybe 10 applicants.
Still, has that been trending in which direction you see it?
There are more applicants now than we had before. That could be because they know us, and I think part of it is we're lucky in that we are known for a place that has good benefits and good opportunities for people. So I think we get more applicants than probably normal. But still, we get applicants all the time who are totally not qualified. They can't fill out an application. They can't show up on time to an interview. They can't even have an interview. And that really highlights some of the issues. And oftentimes we get people that, I had somebody the other day come to me with a certificate of a culinary program they went through DOES. Somehow they went through it. And when we get somebody who applies for a job as a cook, the first thing we do is hand them a carrot and say, "Can you cut it up?" This person couldn't cut a carrot. So what's the use of that piece of paper? I think there's too many of those types of programs where people go through that don't amount to anything other than just continue the bureaucracy of training, quote unquote.
And when you get these applicants who can't get past the application, do you tell them? What do you do? Do you say to them, "Hey, you need to get some skills in this area," or do they just not get back? Or what's the responsibility of an employer when they're not hiring someone who is taking the time to apply?
That's a really good question, honestly, Mark. We don't tell them that, we'll tell them, we'll get back to you. And we know we're not going to.
So note to myself, when Mayor Shallal tells me that he'll get back to me, I should be persistent.
Probably.
And keep coming back. How about ex-offenders? What's your policy there?
When we first started, we used to get applications from Staples, and they all have the little box to check off. Have you been convicted of a crime or felony or something like that? And we recognized after a while that really didn't make any sense. The reason why we recognized it is one time we had somebody fill out an application that didn't have that checkoff box. Apparently they had been an ex-offender. And they were a great employee. They were like a superb employee. They're still with us. And so somebody one day came in and said, "Do you know this guy is online? I saw his picture. He had done this and this." And I said, "Oh my God, we have a criminal amongst us." It's like, whoa. So I looked at him and said, "I can't believe it. This is like so-and-so." And I went up to him. I said, "Is this you?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "You're a great employee, that's fine." So we got rid of those applications. Really, that was kind of a moment. So we got rid of the applications, and now we can apply online, or you can apply in person.
So you don't ask the question?
We don't ask the question anymore. The only time we do ask the question, is if somebody's applying for a management position, where they're dealing with other issues and stuff. I've been really kind of torn on that issue, frankly, but I feel that it's something I haven't involved.
You heard the other night in Foggy Bottom, Councilmember Orange and Wells got into this issue about whether decriminalizing marijuana goes far enough, because if you still have to check that
Right,
box.
absolutely.
Would you want to legislate, is that a decision that should be left to an employer, whether they ask whether someone's been convicted, or do you think that's something that the government should legislate and get rid of
Well,
that box?
The box time, I mean, we don't have box check, but we do background checks on upper management. And it's whatever results come back, if somebody's been convicted of smoking pot or something like that, that's not going to be a barrier to them getting a job in my place. It depends on the kind of conviction they've had and the history they've had. We do it case by case. We had somebody that applied for a job for management who had been convicted of embezzlement. And since they were going to be handling so much money, I thought it was going to be really just a problem. Now, you may say that's unfair, but I'm not sure. I haven't involved in that yet.
What's the government's responsibility as far as creating jobs? How much responsibility lies with the government versus the private sector?
I think the government should facilitate jobs. I don't think so much create them as facilitate for small businesses and to be able to create the jobs. I feel that it's always. I mean, we've had situations where we've had government create jobs, and I think some of them have been very good. You know, startup jobs and being able to get, especially like the summer jobs program for kids, to be able to extend that, in fact, throughout the year would be a great idea. It's an opportunity for kids to learn a skill, learn how to work, learn the responsibilities of work, save money, and all that stuff. I do believe that sometimes the government gets in the way of small businesses creating jobs, and I wish that this government would be much more responsive to the needs of small businesses, because they really are the engine that creates the jobs, and they're sustainable jobs.
Have you found that not just in Mayor Gray's administration, who you're running against, but in, I guess your businesses span, I guess, back to Williams' administration?
Well, way back before then. It was in the 80s. I've been doing business in the city.
So have you found this to be a trend with the district government?
Well, DCRA is kind of a one-stop shop for many things, and they know one thing to do. They can say yes or no. There's nothing in between. And oftentimes, small businesses that are trying to start up, they need help to be able to move things forward. A yes or no answer is not good enough. And there's a sense of, the people that are standing behind the counter oftentimes don't really have a mindset to try to get this business person up and rolling as quickly as possible. Because that person is going to create jobs, going to pay taxes, going to create the income that keeps them behind that counter. And I find that unfortunate, sometimes, that tension that happens between a business person or someone who's trying to do a startup and the environment they have to deal with in order for them to get there. Young people especially who are trying to start a business or something, they have so much excitement, so much thrill about the idea of wanting to start the business. They go to DCRA and it sucks the life out of them. By the time they come out, they don't want to go to business. They just want to go back to their 9-to-5 job. And that's not good. I mean, I think we need to have, I would put a small business window there where it's manned by a business person behind it who understands business, understands the challenges of business, and understands the idea that every day for a small business could be the difference between life and death for that business. Someone should be there to handhold people and walk them through the process rather than say, nope, you're missing this paper, go home, start over again.
Let's talk a little, kind of shift into affordable housing. I'm trying to think if it's a chicken and the egg thing. When we look at where people are where unemployment is chronic in the District of Columbia, it's in neighborhoods where there isn't as much jobs, obviously, and people have to travel, but then they can't afford to live in the neighborhoods quite often where there are jobs. And so, how do you solve that? What comes first? Do you create jobs in neighborhoods? Do you create affordable housing? Do people working at Busboys and Poets live in the neighborhoods? Or do you find that many of them travel in from more affordable neighborhoods?
A lot of them live in the neighborhood. A lot of them have to travel far away to be able to afford where they live. We're touching on the issue of gentrification, obviously. I think that's a that's a huge problem for a city. And oftentimes, I think businesses are blamed for gentrification, and that seems unfair. I think that it's not business so much to blame as it is the way that we have set up zoning laws and public property giveaways and all of those things that have contributed to the rising costs of living in our city. I think we are too focused on a large-scale economy, large business economy, as opposed to a small business economy, which I think is the engine, again, for jobs. When people talk about gentrification, they're not talking about the coffee shop or the small restaurant around the corner. They're talking about big businesses that have changed the landscape of a neighborhood. So in order for us to have a more affordable city, more affordable neighborhoods, is we have to really increase the amount of inclusionary zoning in the developments that are taking place right now. This last few years has been a development's gold rush. I mean, let's face it. There are, I don't know how many cranes. What's the last count? 60, 65. And it's been really kind of unfortunate in that we've turned the city into a pawn shop, giving away every last parcel of land to developers and not asking for a lot of return. Many other jurisdictions have done a much better job in insisting on things in return when these giveaways are done. Obviously there has to be a partnership, but the partnership cannot be just one way. It's got to be a two-way partnership, and this is a city that's very desirable, that developers would kill to be here. We shouldn't treat it as a second-rate city where we have to do so much giveaways in order to get the developers to come here and do business.
What neighborhood do you live in?
I live in Adams Morgan. I mean, that's, talk about a neighborhood that has changed over time. Almost everyone that I've run into used to live in Adams Morgan one time or another when it was Adams Morgan. And now it's...
And how long have you been there?
I've only been there 9 years, 8, 9 years.
And so is that a place that people can afford to live?
No.
Average people can
No.
afford to live?
An average person cannot afford to live in Adams Morgan today, unfortunately. And it's changing the whole demographics of the area. I remember when we first were there, the elementary school around the corner from us had predominantly black children. And it was like 2 years ago, we were just driving by and I happened to see that, and my wife and I both did this double take. And there wasn't one black kid in this row of children walking. And I thought, what happened to the black kids? They vanished overnight. It's really quite remarkable. The change is so fast and so stark.
And so what do you do as mayor? Let me ask you this first. Are there areas in the district that are affordable where young families would be able to start their lives?
I think there's still areas of the city that are affordable, I think. I mean, and there are areas...
What are some of the areas that you would point to?
I mean, the 8th Street corridor, Capitol Hill, some areas of Capitol Hill still are affordable. The 8th Street corridor, I think, still has some affordable areas. Even Shaw still has some affordable areas. There are still some neighborhoods, Upper 14th Street, Petworth, some areas there.
I'm still back on Capitol Hill before. Having just moved off the hill, I'm not feeling it.
Well, further out.
How do you define affordable? What's affordable for you? For you, obviously.
I think we've lost half the inventory of affordable housing in the city in the past decade, clearly. And affordable, I think, one time used to mean that you pay about $750 for one-bedroom apartment. I think that's kind of something that's perceived to be affordable. Now it's almost double that. So having apartments that are available for people to pay that kind of money, I think would be affordable. I think we have a lot of public property still available in the city that we can insist that it becomes affordable for people that live there a long time.
So if there are these pockets of affordability, do you think the majority of the district is unaffordable? It doesn't offer affordable housing?
I don't think the majority of it is, no.
So would you as mayor seek to inject affordable housing into these neighborhoods like Capitol Hill, Adams Morgan, the neighborhoods that don't have affordable housing? And if so, how do you do that? How would you do that as mayor?
Anytime we have a new developer that's looking to do a development in a plot of land that's available, I think we have to insist on making sure that that plot of land is going to include some serious affordable housing, include increase inclusionary zoning to be 20 to 30%. Maybe 30% I think would be appropriate in some neighborhoods, maybe even more. There are areas in Anacostia where they're looking for 40 or 50% or even more in inclusionary zoning that is truly affordable in the sense that it's not based on the regional AMI, but based on the local AMI, so that you can have a more true sense of what is affordable. I was talking to one developer who was doing a development over, or still in the process, trying to do the McMillan, the McMillan project there. And their inclusionary zoning, I think, commitment to the city is 80% of AMI, which is what, about $80,000 or so? Or maybe a little more, even more, about 85, 90?
What's AMI?
Yeah, the average median income, which is based on a regional average, which is what, 110 or so now, $110,000, 107. All of you guys are smart people in this room. You should know this. About 107,000 is what I understand is the AMI here in the city, or around the region. And so when you're talking 80% of that, you're talking a little over $80,000 to be able to. That's considered affordable housing. Now that's a huge giveaway that the city is doing. The developer is going to make oodles of money with that. And to just settle for that as being, so the developer goes around touting it as being an affordable housing project. That they're actually building affordable housing. Well, from a distance, that sounds really nice, but up close, it's not really going to include the people that live in that community. Brookland is is a very good example of a quickly gentrifying community that still has some affordable housing.
And what about renters? And what do you do to protect renters?
I think there are things that we should do. We should first of all, a lot of the owners of these buildings who are trying to sell the buildings, they should be able to offer it to the tenants that are there. But we have some great programs. The Tenant Opportunities to Purchase Act, for instance, is available where they can actually help tenants to establish a co-op and be able to buy the building they're in. That's not available that easily. It's not promoted that easily. It's not, a lot of tenants don't know enough about it. And there's this process where the landlord goes and grabs a couple tenants and pays them off and, creates a sort of division between the tenants too early on in the process. And they shouldn't be able to do that.
Are there other programs that you see that are currently in existence right now that are helping to create more affordable housing that you think are working that you would like to expand, or that you see that aren't working that you would get rid of?
Sure. The rent supplement that we do is an excellent way to keep people in a place that they cannot afford. I think it's great. I think the programs we have are available. The problem is that sometimes there's a huge waiting list for them, or they're woefully underfunded, or they're not well promoted to the people that need them. And I think that's what I'm finding as I go around and ask around what people have done and what do they need. The programs are there, it's just they're not well funded.
And how about for the homeless? Does the government have a responsibility? Do people have a right to housing?
Absolutely. I think, the way we deal with homelessness here is is a little bit alarming as well. I think when I hear the mayor, who's been involved in these issues, I think for many years in his career, calls this a crisis, I'm rather surprised by that. A crisis is something that you didn't see coming. Yeah, when you see this coming, when you've cut back on affordable housing and in the past 10 years, when you've underfunded the Housing Production Trust Fund to such a low level for so many years, when you create these situations that have pushed people out or left them out on the street, and all of a sudden you have huge influx of, not influx, but a huge amount of homelessness in your community, well, that was coming. Didn't happen overnight. Now he's saying that a lot of people are coming from Virginia and Maryland and all that. That hasn't changed. It's been that way for a long time. We've always had, porous, borders, obviously. And then trying to talk about the idea that we need to check their IDs or send them back to their homes within like a day or 24 hours makes very little sense. It's not right for us, but somebody goes homeless, could be a number of reasons. They could be in an unsafe home, they could be in an unsafe situation, or they could have, they have no other option, living in their car, living on on the street, for us to put that much more pressure on them, send them back to where they came from, so they can go couch surf with relatives or with an abusive spouse or whatever else there might be, seemed like a really ill-conceived idea.
Which I think the mayor has pulled back from.
Well, thank goodness. I think this election season has helped him find his compass a little bit. So that's a good thing. You know, oftentimes these times is when people should push as hard as possible, because frequently election season things go back to a different state of urgency.
So what does Mayor Shallal do then for next winter as far as preparing? You see it coming, it's not going to sneak up on you.
Right.
So what do you do differently than what the city did this year?
I would look at other jurisdictions that have done a much better job and learn from them. Cities like Salt Lake City and Phoenix, Arizona have done a very good job in not only reducing homelessness, but they're starting to shut down shelters because they don't need them. They actually have empty beds. There's a lot of programs, again, some of them are federal programs. The permanent supportive housing, for instance, that brings people that are challenged into an immediate home, or a rapid rehousing where people that are homeless get put in a temporary basis, at least in a home, so that they can have some wraparound services and get them back on their feet. There's the Way Home, which is a program that's put for returning veterans. There's all kinds of programs out there that should be employed and maximized to their fullest potential. The idea that we put people in a homeless shelter, spend $55,000 on them to put them in DC General, or farm them out to hotel rooms, all over the city and outside the city, makes little sense to me. Without really any regards that, you're sending a family to a motel in Prince George's County. What's going to happen to the kids? What about school? Who's going to transport them? It just, a lot of stuff doesn't make sense.
In prepping for this,
You prepped for this?
I wasn't prepped.
You was
Just,
prepping.
yes, I know it doesn't show. But I was actually shocked to find out, one, that there is a large number of young parents, you talked about young people, 18 to 24, who make up the families who are showing up, but that unaccompanied minors show up on a hypothermia day and are turned away. So are those things that you would change? What do you do about the young families, and what do you do about the unaccompanied minors?
I think the minors are a really big deal. I mean, it's a really big issue. I mean, I would make sure that there is nightly patrols that look out for young people that are out in the street that don't have a home, and try to work with them. Give them some sort of services. Try to reunite them with their family. Try to do some way to resolve the cause that brought them out to the street to begin with. There's, I think, about 1,600 homeless kids out and about on a daily basis in the city. That seems really unfortunate. There are some great programs also. There's a program that we've been supporting. What is it? It's a program out in Southeast that supports gay and lesbian teenagers who have been pushed out of their home for obvious reasons. Their parents don't like their lifestyle and have thrown them out of the house. And this wonderful program takes them in, and it's funded by the city as well and by private donations. So encourage these smaller programs to be able to get these kids back on their feet so that they can finish their school and be able to become, productive adults. Otherwise, they end up, living a life of, drug addiction, maybe prostitution. Who else? Who knows what else? So I would make sure that there's a vigilant approach to making sure that these young people aren't left out on the street to fend for themselves.
And the families, what about, how do you reduce the number of families that?
You mean young families?
Young families that we're seeing coming through the system.
I mean, young families, it's a bigger social problem that we have to deal with. We have one of the highest teen pregnancies in the entire country in this city, and that's really disturbing. Obviously, young people having children, unprepared to take care of them, end up finding themselves in all kinds of situations, including homelessness. So, I mean, educating people, starting at an early age to make sure that they don't end up in those situations to begin with, I think would be one way to start. And treating them with dignity and making sure that they have the appropriate services in order for them to be able to succeed. We're woefully underfunded for mental health in this city, whether it's in the schools or whether it's through the Health Alliance and other ways. Mental health is just like oh yeah, there's mental health too. And it's like the first and most important thing that causes some of these problems for people. And we need to really up the ante on our mental health programs in this city. Mental health and dentistry. What's with that? Not enough of that.
When you walk down the street and encounter a homeless person panhandling and asking for money, what do you do? How do you personally handle those situations?
We have, at Busboys and Poets, for instance, we have a fair amount of homeless people that hang around there. We make peace with them by, in fact, we have a couple of them that come on a regular basis there, and as long as they're not going to be disruptive, they're allowed to come in, sit, hang out as long as they want to. We feed them for free, of course, and we allow them to attend some of the open mics and some of the programs we have. Many homeless people have a lot of really, valuable insight and important contributions to make. Oftentimes, they're homeless because of drug addiction or because of mental health or other issues. A lot of times, what I noticed is we used to have this one homeless guy on a regular basis would just create all kinds of problems and pass out in the middle of the street, or on the sidewalk, I should say. And then there'll be like 2 ambulances and a couple of fire trucks and a couple of police cars, all of them trying to take care of this person and carrying him off to an emergency room, I imagine, and then they're back on the street 3 or 4 days later. And I'm thinking, what a waste of money, what a waste of effort. Those ambulances could have been saving Mr. Mills, maybe. He would have lived had it been not for the bad usage of those types of resources that we need to have. We end up spending so much on this end when we should spend it on the front end. And that's really a problem. So how I deal with it, one little anecdote. I was walking one time, there was a homeless guy, and he stopped me. He says, "Give me some money," or something like that. I said, "Look, I'm not going to give you money. I'll buy you something to eat. What would you like?" I asked him, and he said, "Ice cream." I said, "Ice cream? Like, really? You want me to go buy you ice cream?" He said, "Yes, I want ice cream." I said, "Okay, I'm going to go buy him ice cream." So I went and got him ice cream, and I brought it back. And I said, "Why did you ask for ice cream?" And he said, "No one ever gives me ice cream." And I said, "Well, that makes sense. No one gives you ice cream. Clearly, no one carries ice cream with them to hand it to a homeless person." So I sat with him. We had this wonderful conversation. At the end, I thought, wouldn't it be fun to serve ice cream to a homeless shelter? Like, wouldn't that be special? So I actually talked, he made a lot of sense. I said, "Where are you staying?" He said, "At the CCMV, the men's homeless shelter." I said, "Okay." I said, can I go with you? Can I sort of check it out?" He actually made an appointment. I went there and I visited him. And I visited the director of the center. And I said, "You know what? Ice cream seems to be something really special that a homeless person would never have. Like, they don't serve homeless people ice cream." I said, "Why don't we start this program that every Friday night we do ice cream?" And it became this program called Ice Cream for the Homeless. Get it? So we had ice cream for the homeless. And we did it for the entire summer. We had all these volunteers coming from all directions. And we had ice cream donated. We bought a whole lot of it, but we had ice cream donated. And we had we started out with 2 tubs. By the end of the summer, we had 12 tubs of ice cream. And people were lining up to have ice cream. I think the idea that oftentimes what surprises a lot of people is that homeless people are this alien group that you don't want to talk to, you don't want to look at. And most of us, I think, walk by homeless people, try to ignore them, maybe give them $1 and walk away feeling good that we did something. But rarely do we engage them in a conversation. And I think once you have this conversation with them, you learn their story. And their story is no different than many people that you encounter. So I find it really enriching sometimes to interact with people, and you learn so much more, and you can do so much more than just hand them $1 and walk away.
So as mayor, when residents come to you, say, we had the other night in Georgetown, there were several, or in DuPont, Boggy, there were several people who wrote and said, you know, they're tired of homeless sleeping on their front porches and waking up in the morning and have to step over something. There are shop owners who feel the same way, that they detract from their businesses. So as mayor, what are you gonna, what will you be in your enforcement? What will you do as, you know, when neighbors or neighborhoods or businesses call your administration and say, you know, we've got a problem with these people, homeless people in our neighborhood, and we need you to move them along?
The way it works now is, if there was a homeless person sleeping in my back door or doing something, you know, we had a homeless person that was cooking with aluminum foil inside the trash room and caused a fire because he was using a little aluminum foil little pan and trying to saute something with it, you know. But I don't think it's called saute when you're homeless. I don't know what it would be, but it would be something he's trying to cook. And causes fire, smoke everywhere, and so on. A lot of it, so we'd call the police. The police would show up. They'd pick up this person. They'd take him. They'd book him, I guess, or something. Maybe they drop him off at the next corner. I really don't know what they do with homeless people that do things like that. And then the next day, he's back on the street. I mean, literally the next day, I see him, and I'm thinking, like, shouldn't this person be getting some kind of help? Should this person be getting some kind of mental help? Some kind of assistance to take him to a program or something so that he doesn't have to be back on the street and somebody else has to call the police again and bring him out. So I would make sure that whenever somebody gets picked up for that, make sure that there's a social worker or someone that can help them find a better way. So they're not just picked up, booked, and thrown back out on the street again. The police don't know what to do with them. They've told me this. We don't know what to do with them. There's not a real understanding of what to do with someone who you take somewhere because somebody called because they're sleeping in their stoop or whatever. They come and ask them to move on. That's all they do. If they move on, that's fine. If they passed out, they have an ambulance pick them up, take them to a hospital, and they get released the next day. I don't think that's an efficient way or functional way to run a city. I think you have to look at everyone as if they're part of your family at some level or another in a city. There's got to be a social contract that we all have to agree on, that everyone's going to contribute into, and that we will make sure that everybody in the city gets at least an opportunity to be able to be successful, whatever they want to be successful at. And for someone that's homeless, it usually means that they need a home, obviously, but they need some mental health, they need some kind of health services, maybe they need some literacy program, maybe they need some jobs program, something to be able to learn a skill or something so that they don't have to be homeless on the street all the time. I've seen too many of the same people on the street day after day, week after week, around where I live, around my businesses, and that's not a good way to run the city.
Let's talk a little bit about education and how it impacts the income gap. But before I ask that, I have a topic I think near and dear to anybody. Do you have kids?
I do.
Are they in school? Or what?
4.
4 years?
Yeah, they're out of school.
Oh, they're out of school,
Yeah.
okay. Well, I'm sure you went through what we're all going through tonight, and that is waiting for DC Public Schools to make a decision on whether we're going to school tomorrow morning.
They closed.
They already closed? So let me ask you, what would be your policy with that?
Personnel?
Well, no, just about when the decision is made. There's so
I don't
many
think-
times
look,
when the school, DCPS drags behind other school districts and makes.
I have a whole different perspective on this issue, and it's probably not going to be so popular. I don't think we should ever close personnel. I find it ridiculous that we are the nation's capital, that by some weather, we're going to get us down to our knees and prevents us from doing what we want to do. I find it ridiculous.
So,
I would make sure that there are plows, that there are National Guard, whatever it takes to clean those streets to make sure that they're ready for everybody to function like a normal day. We shouldn't have to be at the mercy of some weather occurrence. I find it odd.
so is busboys and pucks going to be open tomorrow?
Hell yeah.
So,
Of course we're going to be open.
so what do you say to your employees who say, hey,
If they can't make it, they can't make it. But a lot of them are nearby. We don't penalize them for not making it, clearly. A lot of them, live nearby, luckily, and we can always find enough people to be able to operate. Now, if it snows all day and they can't get home, we put them up in a hotel. And we've done that many times, where we put up our employees in hotels. it's not a great idea because stuff happens at hotels.
You know, it's been like with a lot of teachers up in hotels, because most teachers don't live in the neighborhoods where they teach. And so, I mean, really, I really gotta get to this thing that you don't wanna close schools when it snows, I'm sorry, because, you know, but what about the safety?
Well, maybe if we have an affordable city, maybe the teachers could live here, you know, that's what.
What about just the safety aspect of kids walking, getting on buses,
You know what?
traveling to school?
Kids all over the world in very, very snowy countries and very snowy cities go to school with snow. I mean, it just, you know, I mean, there are parts of the world and parts of the country where snow doesn't stop. It starts and you got snow for the entire winter. And people learn to deal with it. I just find it that it sends a really bad signal to the rest of the world that we are the nation's capital and we are at the mercy of 4 inches of snow. I find that weird. But I'm unusual, so.
Do you think the city?
Can we do a poll?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, it's your hour.
Well, all of you just want the day off from work, so that's not fair. But let's say, do you think we should stay open no matter what?
And are these parents?
Okay, see, that's like a fairly good percentage. I thought one person would raise their hand, but that's a good percentage.
Do you think the city does, how do you rate the city on clearing snow?
You know, it's.
I'm gonna get off the snow topic in a minute, I got one more question.
Yeah, I mean, you know, how do I rate the city snow? I think probably below average. I think it could do much better. It's not horrible, but it could do much better. I'd rather work on the pock marks in the street, frankly. I've lost 2 tires, so I'd like to have that fixed. The snow is the least of my problems at this point.
And you guys, as a business, you take seriously your sidewalks? And
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we have an emergency plan. I mean, you know, everyone's got their shovels, everyone's got their salt, everyone's got their staff already, you know, who's gonna be there, who's not gonna be there, who's gonna call who's gonna not call who, and so on.
All right, let's get back on track, and I'll just let that fool with me green. Can't wait to tell my kids. Those are 2 votes you just lost.
How old are they?
Yeah, one at Wilson, one at Deal, so I hope you're not.
Well, they're not voters, are they?
No, they're not. So
Yeah,
they'll be okay, I think.
The hell with them.
I'll let them know. There are a couple of gaps when it comes into achievement gaps, when we're talking about education in the District of Columbia. And one of them is the amount of DC students who end up getting higher education degrees. And the fact that as we look to the future, those degrees are going to become all the more important to actually have a job here in the District of Columbia, a well-paying job in the District of Columbia. How do you close that gap?
I read somewhere that by 2018, I think 80% of the jobs will require a college education in the city, which seems like really, really high.
I have 70% by 2018 here in my notes.
Is that 70%? Okay.
Compiled by someone who
Okay.
knows.
All right, good.
Oh.
So 70%, which is like immense, especially, you know, given that
What's your education like?
I went to college, 4-year college, and then I got into medical school. And I went to medical school for a semester, and I dropped out. My mother didn't find out that I dropped out till almost 6 months later. And
My mom still doesn't know I
It's probably a good thing. But she was devastated, you know, because they wanted a doctor, and I had nothing to do with wanting to be a doctor. So I decided to quit. So I left medical school, and then and since I went to the Institute for Conflict Analysis and Resolution at George Mason University, and I studied their conflict resolution.
So back to the gap of this higher education gap in the district. How do you solve that problem?
Well, I think we need to solve the education problem first before we go to the higher part. I mean, our education system here in many ways is broken. I mean, when you talk about in some schools, 60% of the kids don't finish high school. And, you know, when you talk about their literacy, even the ones that finish high school don't do very well necessarily in their ability to get a job because of their literacy gap, clearly. There's, you know, the mayor walks around being the education mayor, which I think is nice, but He talks about the NAEP results, the National Assessment for Educational Progress, which is the nation's report card. He talks about those results having increased over time. And yes, if you look at the graph actually since 2000, you've seen an uphill tick on these results. And so, but let's talk about the Education Reform Act that took place in 2007. From that time till now, the gap, the achievement gap between black kids and white kids has doubled. Black kids have gone into a flat line, and white kids have shot up through the roof. And part of the reason for that is because there's big demographic changes taking place in the city. It has nothing to do with this amazing reforms that we've done. The reforms have really been not so amazing after all. That below the NAEP results, that oftentimes the mayor goes out, and Arnie Duncan, even Obama hails, are really not a fair assessment of our school system. The school system needs some major overhaul. It cannot continue on this path expecting to have every kid succeed. Black kids will continue to drop between the cracks and end up failing. And that's just unfair. I think it's immoral, in fact, to continue to say that our schools are doing well when a lot of kids are not doing well. It just seems, I've challenged the mayor many times in conversations, but he parrots the same thing over and over again. I said, stop saying schools are doing great. You know, you're trying to impress white parents, that's nice, but you also need to talk about the issues that are of concern, which is the black kids that are losing, that we're losing every day. Every day.
So, and that's the other gap that I was going to talk about between black and white. So you have these gaps, you say there's a problem, so how do you fix it? What do you do then to make things better as mayor? How do you
Well,
fix it?
again, I think you can't fix education with one thing. You know, oftentimes people say, well, do you change Kaya Henderson? Like, Kaya Henderson is not God. I mean, she's a person. She has, of course, you have to create a vision. You have to create a vision that says, I will commit that every school is going to be successful. As opposed to, I will commit I will close down any school that is not. That's a very different vision. You have to commit that every school is going to be successful. And you begin by making sure that you look at the schools that need help and make sure you have enough wraparound services to ensure that that school succeeds. It's not magic. We can't make schools be responsible for every ill in society. Schools and teachers are having to be, you know, the teachers particularly having to be social workers and mental health specialists and nurses and nutritionists. I talk to teachers who actually have to bring vegetables and fruits to their students because they've never seen a fresh fruit and a fresh vegetable at their home. That's ridiculous. How can you begin to teach a kid that starts out at that level? So for us to put that onus on teachers and say, okay, you have one test, one damn test. You either make it or you don't. And if you do well on that test, you get a raise, you keep your job. The principal gets a raise, keeps his job, and the school stays open. If you mess up that test, you lose your job, the principal loses their job, and the school closes. That's insane. How many of you have more than one kid? And how many of you believe in such thing as a standardized test? You think both of your kids take the test the same way? Absolutely not. Yes, we need tests. We need to have some kind of gauge to understand. How many are picking up my time?
I'll be asking the same questions.
The same question.
Now, Billy, you got a couple of questions
So
in
the
advance.
idea that we have the standardized test, that the be-all and end-all, that everything depends on, seems really ill-informed and foolhardy. So I would make sure that we don't have such an emphasis on standardized tests. I would make sure that we use tests as a matrix to advance the agenda forward, to be able to use more developmental programs for that and so on. I would make sure that we bring the arts back in schools. Arts and music are important for kids to learn. It's important for kids to stay in school. Sometimes that's one reason to stay. I would ensure that sports programs are really well managed and important to every school. I know that there's some administrative suit that's going on about girls not having the same opportunities as boys in the city. I know Title IX is taking care of that, but there seems to be some issue in the city with that. I would make sure that I close that gap. I would make sure that we go away from a culture of blame and intimidation that the culture that's been created with this current chancellor and current mayor to a culture that is more collaborative and more supportive of the teachers and of the schools. The teachers, we've waged a war on them. And I don't think that's a good way to go about doing it. We've turned teaching into a hobby. Teaching is not a hobby, it's a profession. It takes good people to learn this profession. It takes years, at least 5 years to make a great teacher after they get out of college. So for us to have teachers be churning so quickly in this school system, after the first 2 years, 50% of the teachers drop out. In the first 6 years, 80% of them drop out of schools, go on to other jurisdictions. That's twice the national average. That's not a good record to be able to say our schools are going to do well. They get frustrated and they walk away. They're intimidated, they're scared, they're under this gun that doesn't work.
You know, some of the supporters of impact, the testing mechanism you were just saying you didn't think was working, we say, hey, look, this is how we weed out those bad teachers early, and then we reward the good teachers, and that's going to help those good teachers to stay. I mean, is that not, how would you get the good teachers to stay longer if you think attrition is such a problem?
We can't assess, you know, the impact does like drive-by assessments. It's like, you know, it's like quick, you know, one time, you know, they do like five shots in time of how this teacher is doing, and it's blind. It's done in such a way that there's this, I guess, this fear of connecting with the union that they have to be so objective that they become stupid, really. I mean, at some point, you have to be able to evaluate a teacher on a matrix that's other than check a box and check a box and check a box. You got 5 boxes, you miss, you're gone. That doesn't make any sense. There are much better programs. I mean, you know, Joshua Starr and Montgomery County does a much better job. And their impact or their teacher assessment is much more collaborative, as it should be. An assessment should be just that. We're making an assessment. Once the teacher stays in the system, once you've decided after the probation period that teacher is going to stay, you work with them to make sure you develop them, make sure that they're great teachers. When Michelle Reed first came into the system, she stopped development for teachers. I mean, for a couple of years, it was like very little development work going with teachers. And she ended up weeding these people out. Yes, some needed weeded out, to be weeded out, no question about it. But I think the way we're going about it now, we're not going to keep great teachers. And we're going to have these teachers that are like going to be trained to teach to this damn test. And yes, once they figure it out, if I'm going to get $20,000 bonus or $15,000 bonus at the end of the year, damn, I'm going to lie, cheat, and steal to get it if I need that money. That's not how we, and we've seen it. You know, 100 schools or so had this cheating scandal here that happened. No real follow-up happened on that. You know, I think they did an audit of one school and kind of brushed it under the carpet. It was gone. When a similar situation happened in Atlanta, Georgia, there were heads that were rolling. People were moving on. You don't go cheating like that. And the impact, I mean, weren't there 40 teachers that were just recently assessed wrong, and then they had to go back and retract their situation? So because it's done so blindly, it's not taken into consideration every individual case by case, and you have to do that in order for you to make a great school system. And the wraparound services are so necessary. I don't want to close schools. I want to make sure every school succeeds. You know, and I'm sorry for continuing, but why do you think all of a sudden there's this obsession with middle schools in this city? Middle schools have been around for a long time, okay? Suddenly, aren't you hearing a lot about middle schools these days? Much more than normal? So why do you think that's happening?
Population coming of age is different.
I'm sorry?
Population coming of age is different.
It's the new parents that are moving in, mostly white parents that are moving in, that are putting a lot of pressure on the school system, saying, wait a minute, we're not going to move out of the city because we like it here. And we don't want to pay $40,000 for little Johnny to send them to, you know, some private school. So you better get your act together. Suddenly everybody is up in arms about like middle school, we just discovered it. Like, what the hell? You know, that should have been talked about way before. Why is it when black kids end up having to fall, nobody cares? I don't get it. I honestly don't get it. And it frustrates me because we have black mayors, we have black council members, we have all these people that should care. They don't. I'm sorry.
Let me ask one last question. We'll get you out of here on time.
Okay.
Our hosts here at UDC Law and the University District of Columbia, how do you think things are going for UDC, the university, the community college, the direction here? And as mayor, what would be your vision as far as what you would want to see and what you would want to fund?
I think the idea of the community college was a
You
great
have
idea.
30 seconds.
Yeah, I think the idea of a community college is a good idea. I think it's good to have a process to get someone to college that comes out of high school, and there's no barrier. You actually can get in there. I think it's nice to put some barriers for UDC being a four-year college, and the community college becomes in many ways remedial. In this city, I think a lot of people that come out of high school need a lot of remediation in order for them to get up to speed to be in a four-year college. So I think it's a good thing to separate the two-year college or the community college from the four-year college that we have there. At the same time, we need to make sure that we don't cut programs. We've cut the history program, sociology program, graphic arts, lots of great programs that I think it's a shame they shouldn't be cut. I think you need to have more funding for the school. You need to make sure that that UDC becomes really the school that a lot of people want to aspire to go to, and not the throwaway school that sometimes it's perceived as being.
Andy Shallal will give you 30 minutes for a closing statement. We appreciate you being here tonight.
Well, thank you. 30 minutes, okay. I was born by the way. No, I want to thank you, really. I think I have to say, my experience has been, this is my first time running for office, for such an office. I have a newfound appreciation for politicians. I think politicians are decent people. They really try to do the best they can. Some of them fall, to bad things, but a lot of them really have their heart in the right place to do a great job. I do believe that this city is at a turning moment, and I think it really, I'm a business person, so I believe in investing. And we have a lot of money in our rainy day fund now, and it's going to grow in the next couple of years by all accounts. The fact of the matter is, this is the time to invest in all these opportunities really out there, so that the next time we do have this economic downturn that's bound to happen, we don't end up with this crack in the city. I do believe the city is woefully divided racially, and I do believe that we need to have this conversation much more deeply, much more intentionally than we have been having. It's a shame that a city that talks about all these important issues, we end up talking past each other because we don't talk about the things that really are there in the middle of the room every single conversation you have, and that is race. In this city, race matters. It's a big deal. It's a big deal in this country, and I think unless we have whatever you're talking about, housing, schools, gentrification, economic development, whatever it is, if you don't infuse race into it and have an honest conversation with one another, I don't think we can ever get past it.
Andy Shallal, we appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
We're going to take about 5 minutes break, 15 more things to the restroom, say hello to Andy, and then we'll have Tommy Wells up here. All right. So, round 2, Councilmember Tommy Wells, Ward 6 candidate for mayor. Welcome. Councilmember, before you arrived, I explained this is a series being put on here by several groups. The main focus is the income gap in the United States, and particularly in the District of Columbia, and its impact on jobs, the impact of jobs, education, things of that nature on the income inequality gap. Mr. Shallal spent an hour with us. We went through a lot of questions, and I'll start with one of the things that will be part of the Mayor Shallal administration's platform, and that is school every day, no matter what the weather.
Well, Mark, what I'll start off with saying is that every event I go to, only one have they provided union produced water. All these bottles, no union workforce produces bottled water. And so we support wages at the lowest end of the income scale every time we provide these bottles of water. If you want to provide water that is produced by people that are making living wages, is the water produced by WASA. So next time we should have a pitcher of water union-made water, so that we can live our values. Because I'm always embarrassed because as I talk, I eventually have to open this thing. And I'm eventually on camera. I usually move these bottles away from me, but eventually I get thirsty.
First, I believe Director Hawkins would like you to know that they changed the name 2 years ago to DC Water. You're not lost that.
Whatever.
And are you sure that every time that you pay for the DC Council breakfast out of your own pocket, that you don't buy bottled water? Because I can't remember, bottled water is almost always served at the council breakfast.
You come into my office and you'll see
I'm
that
talking about the council
first we
breakfast
start with how I live every day, that in my office you'll not find bottled water, that it's Brita or filtered otherwise. Then the other thing you'll find is that I try not to buy bottled water. I don't intend to, but you're right. I'm the only one that pays out of their own pocket, except for probably Grasso, for the council breakfast, because the other council members use the money given to them by the corporations or by you or anyone else, rather than their own money to help feed me, which is, I guess, somewhat appreciated, but no.
Let's get back on track, and I swear to God, I think you stole my notes.
right.
I was serious when I said, we were talking about education, and I started off with snow and snow days, and Mr. Shallal said he was very serious, that if you were mayor, he would be reluctant to ever close schools because of bad weather. You've been on the school board, you've been a DC council member, what do you think about that? It struck me, I'm going to hang up on it for the entire night.
I remember when I first started school on the outside of Buffalo, New York. And here we go. There were times when it snowed where I had to go to the bottom of the hill because no vehicle could get up the hill to get me. And I was a little, kindergartner going through the snowbanks to get down there so I could get the van. But there's times when we have either a weather event or some other event in the city that impacts our families and children. To say that we're just going to disregard any externalities is, really don't know what else to say. I see that you have been struck by that, Mark.
I haven't.
And you're going to ponder that for a while.
Oh, I'm going to tweet it. Let me ask, let's stay on education and its impact on the income gap, which is just about as bad here in the District of Columbia as it possibly could be anywhere else in the country. So when you came in, Mr. Shallal was talking about education at that time, and he was complaining that while the Gray administration touts successes in test scores, that there is a gap between black and white, and because of that, and that indicates a failure of DC schools to properly prepare students to get jobs and not be left out when it comes to this income inequality gap. You've been on the school board, you've been on the DC council. What is your responsibility there that we still, all these years later, still have this gap between black and white?
When I was on the DC school board, I met with parents because, as you know, you lived in that neighborhood that I represented. And I asked parents, why won't you send children to the neighborhood elementary schools? And schools were losing population every year dramatically. And asked them, what do you need? And so I assumed, the parents would come up with a lot of different things. What I didn't know they'd come up with is we want to start at 3 years old. So I went to Dr. Janey, who is superintendent, brought everybody together and said, could you find out if we can start at 3 years old? And so they came back and they said, we can. And we piloted 6 schools starting at 3 years old. And there's 2 things about that. One is parents started coming back into the schools. At the elementary schools in Ward 6, there's pretty much a waiting list at every elementary school. Working with families works. The other thing that we've done in Ward 6 is that we're adding 3 more elementary schools. They're closing schools across DC. When you close the neighborhood elementary school in a neighborhood, any family that has a choice will not live in that neighborhood if they don't have an elementary school that they can go to that's quality school, as a matter of right. So we've done that in Ward 6, added 3 more elementary schools. And the thing about these schools is that they're economically integrated. That we have more public housing in Ward 6 than any other ward. This is not just gentrification. So there's going to be 2 tiers to this answer. The first thing is Some of the gains that we're seeing is because students are starting younger. But we're going to have to even look even earlier. There's a study done, and many of you are aware of this. They did a study that showed that children from poor families have about 500 words by the time they hit 3 years old. Children from middle-class families have around 1,200 to 1,500 words at 3 years old. Now these children look just alike, they play together, they seem just as active and all that. But when you get down to how many words you have to describe your world, to understand instructions, and to be able to ask questions, 500 words versus 1,200 to 1,500 words is everything. And so children from poor means start off even further behind. So I think that even though we're starting at 3 years old, we're starting to see changes from that in terms of improvements, that we have to have intervention starting at 0 to 3. And that's where we make the intervention early in order to see that all children have as many words to be able to describe their world and interact in their world and act powerfully in their world as soon as possible, that we have to equalize that. And that's where I'll make an investment, is 0 to 3. And then they start at 3 years old and then move up. Now what you're talking about is income inequality based on outcomes from what happens around high school. I would make a $100 million investment right off the bat of reprogramming some of the programs we have, but also some of the new money we have in youth. Every youth that needs and should have and can have an after-school job should have one. If you're making money, you're less likely to want to hit someone over the head and steal their iPhone. It also puts you in touch and connected to another adult. You start preparing yourself for the work world. Summer youth program has been very successful. We have the apparatus. It should operate year-round. The other thing is that we have different boutique programs that work with youth, but a major investment that makes a commitment that we have the after-school programs that we need. If we had after-school for all, that's about $130 million. The $100 million is a big investment in the beginning to engage youth in a way that they don't, you know, 40% dropout rate it's a mean statistic because it's not 40% average across the city. Ward 3 does not have a 40% dropout rate. It means that the dropout rate is even higher in the poorer parts of our city. That is not only a crisis, but there's an economic return by investing in youth to see that they have what they need to stay in school, targeted case management targeted to families, not just to the youth. Usually the way we organize ourselves, the youth gets in trouble, either as a teen parent or crime, all the resources go to the youth, but it's the family that is often at risk, and the family needs targeted case management. I understand this. I started my life here as a social worker. I helped make substantial changes to the child welfare system for Washington. I understand systemic reform. I believe that systemic reform is what we've done with the neighborhood elementary schools in Ward 6. That's why, as you brought up, everybody's talking about middle schools. Somebody said why. The answer was, you're right, we have a huge bubble of young people getting ready to go to middle school, and we don't have enough high-quality middle schools for them. And that's systemic change. So I believe that if we invest in youth in a way that is transformational, it's an outcome-based budget. Difference being outcome-based, we've done performance-based. Performance-based budget says this is how many people you're going to serve. Outcome-based means this is how many people got jobs. This is how many youth stayed in school. Every program that we fund must be an outcomes-based budget, and if you don't meet your outcomes, then you lose your contract and we go somewhere else. It's not how many people you serve, but it's how many people meet the outcomes that we're paying for. So that is a major economic development investment for the city. It's not just social services, but we'll have a city where youth contribute to the tax rolls, contribute to being here, take the jobs when the businesses come in, versus having others take those jobs.
So maybe I was not clear about my question, and I appreciate you telling us what you would do as mayor, but my question was, what have you been doing as a council member and as a school board member that has while we have gotten to this point where we have this enormous gap between black and white?
So the first thing is that I started, and I know Vince Gray, his major achievement on council was pre-K for all. So I want to be clear, I started 3-year-old programs in just 6 schools, then we ramped up to 12. And to Vince Gray's credit, that when he got on the council, or became chair, he pushed it to be citywide. So I don't want to take that away. When I was in school board, I started it. The other thing that I did on school board is that one of the things that we did is that we rebuilt Phelps. We rebuilt McKinley Tech. Now I know that.
So if you've been doing all this great stuff, how does this, I mean, I'm not trying to blame you, but, you know, you've been an elected official all this time, and we are where we are. Do you hold any responsibility for the fact that we have this divide between black and white when it comes to education? Has the focus not been in the right place? And you know, I get that you're not
I think
the
that
chancellor
primarily,
or the mayor.
I think that primarily, I know there's, we're not post-racial America, and we're not post-racial DC. But on the divide, it is very much class and education. There's not a lot of poor, uneducated white people in DC. There's just not. But there are a lot of poor, undereducated African Americans in DC. So that is why certainly why I went from being a city social worker to serving on the school board, is to address not just education inequalities or economic inequalities, but social justice inequalities. That's what I've put my life to. And yeah, I have accomplishments with that. The rebuilding a child welfare system, I have something to show for that. We're down to 1,100 children, down from 3,300 children. When I started out as a social worker, we didn't have a response to HIV and AIDS. Children were living in hospitals that were healthy. And I have helped the city address that and work through that and made a major change. I got for the law students here, I was the architect for a family court for Washington, D.C. We didn't have a family court. The most number of adoptions children coming out of foster care ever was 64 in 1 year. After we got a family court, and I wrote the bill with a guy named Bob Gutman. We took it to Tom DeLay, the Hammer. We put the bill through, and in our 3rd year of a family court in D.C., we did over 300 adoptions of children out of foster care. That changes lives. The number of children I was able to match to foster families instead of living in group homes, well, actually living in orphanages, now have lives. The young man that's graduating from college in Pennsylvania that I've been mentoring since 2nd grade, who's first ever in his family to ever go to college, that it changed his life. Jan's tutoring program, where I just emceed their event tonight for their pre-Oscars program. Tom Sherwood was there. That the number of youth that now have gone to college because of that program changes lives. My whole life, Mark, not just as a school board member, not just as a council member, not just as the other things I've joined. My whole life has been about social justice and improving outcomes for people, and I can show you where I've changed systems and I've changed this city.
Let's talk about jobs and getting people jobs. Do you remember the last time you were unemployed? Have you gone any stretch of time being unemployed?
Of course, yeah.
I mean, other than being in college, and I mean, where you were looking for a job, you couldn't find a job.
When I first came to DC, I sold my car for a train ticket in 1983. Came up here and didn't have a job. I lived on the floor of a friend that I knew at Catholic University. First place I lived from there is I met someone that was actually a priest at a convent, and I moved into his apartment, slept on the sofa of the convent, and looked for a job. I looked for work for some months, and eventually my first job was at the Kitchen Bazaar, where I was a sales clerk.
How'd that go?
I had just gotten a master's in social work, and I went in and they interviewed me and they said, which would you choose, Sabatier or Henkel? I had no idea what they're talking about. And then they said, do you prefer Calphalon or Le Creuset? I said, I still don't know what you're talking about, but I'm a social worker. You probably have some pretty high maintenance people that walk into the store and I can deal with them. And if your staff's not getting along, we can do group. So they hired me.
And was that the last time that you went any extended period of time?
Well, I ended up, I went out on the Mondale campaign, and I spent, I didn't have any money, and so after the primary, when they had the summer of the convention and all that, I went to my sister's up in Minneapolis and looked for work, and eventually I got a job going door to door for Clean Water Action Project. And that's what I did until I went back out on the Mondale campaign. And then after that campaign, we lost. I went back to Birmingham to look for work, couldn't find a job, and I came back to DC.
So you may find yourself unemployed by the end of this year.
Yep.
What do it's much tougher these days. What do you think about when you think about that? I mean, that
Look,
the
Mark.
prospect of looking for a job in this job market.
Well, first off, when I was a DC social worker, I brought a class action lawsuit against my employer. I've always been willing to lose my job to do what I think is right. And I do believe, and I know being a middle-aged older man going back into the work world, depending on what I do, is it's uncertain. But this is not a dress rehearsal. I really do live my values, what I believe in, and trust that things will work out.
And so,
The other thing, I don't know what you're getting at, I did living the wage for 7 days, only 7 days. Mind you, people live on minimum wage for years and years and years, so I don't want any kudos for that. But I did it for a couple reasons. One is I wanted the whole city to stay focused on raising the minimum wage for DC. So I did it as, someone said, that's a publicity stunt. I said, absolutely, it's a publicity stunt. I'm running for mayor and I'm going to use this megaphone for something. And so I I took what a single person on minimum wage would have left over for food and would have left over for transportation. And what shocked me, food was the easy part. So for 7 days, I spent $36 for food. And that was enough money. It was a little high in sodium because I kept getting the 2-for-1s and they're not also healthy stuff. But I had a crock pot, made a lot of pasta. But what killed me was transportation. I couldn't afford to ride the subway system. That was wiping my money out right away. What I started out with was $98 and then minus $36 for the food, and that's what I had left for 7 days for transit. I also shopped that day for my $36 worth of food with a woman who lives on minimum wage and is raising a child. She works at McDonald's. And as we walked in, she said things like, we were going into the Safeway. She looked at the big cheese bin with all the different kinds of cheeses. She says, that's not for me. And we just kept walking. So many places in the grocery store she would say, that's not for me. And it helped me see, and I'd never thought about that, even though it's obvious that I shop in the same place, exist in the same places as her, but yet when we're standing together, everything that I look at as an option for me was not an option for her, and it was instructional, and I stayed in touch with her. So we did our shopping, and then afterwards I had just about some money for getting around town, and it was cold out, because I thought that I would make it up with riding my bicycle. But it was too cold to ride my bicycle. So I quickly was blowing through too much money on Metro. I couldn't take Metro anymore, so I had to take the bus. And that meant that almost every night I had to cancel my events. I could make it to one event because I was not going to get to the next event because it was taking hours to get around town. And riding the bus, as those of you that experienced that, there's times when you're riding the bus and it stops for no reason. They tell everybody to get off. I couldn't believe that. I was going from east of the river to Glover Park, and I had it timed out. It was on the 32. I had it all figured out. And they stopped around 8th Street on Pennsylvania Avenue and told everybody to get out. And everybody else seemed to think that was okay. I was outraged. But I just apparently got on the wrong bus. But I barely made it. I had to cancel events. I don't know what it's like for Cece, the woman that shopped with me, to live every day on minimum wage. But I knew for me, for those 7 days, it restricted my access and meant I couldn't fully participate in things. And it is, it's incredibly constraining and hard.
So let me ask you, how does the government make that easier on people? How does the government make it easier for people who are unemployed or underemployed to look for work? And how does the government make it easier on people who are going to work, living on a minimum wage, survive?
Well, we are raising the minimum wage for everyone, not just a few. We're raising the minimum wage for everyone, and I think it was smart to do it with the neighboring counties. So the criticism or the attack was going to be that we're making our city uncompetitive. So we do that. The other thing we have is that we have to continue to fund the all health insurance for everyone. We have the second highest health insurance coverage in the nation. That's another way that we make it. We have the highest coverage of health insurance for children. And you know, I'm not here to bash my other colleagues, but we got a budget.
Oh, please.
We got a budget a couple years ago where Vince Gray wiped out the funding for undocumented people that don't have their papers here to participate in our health insurance. And we put that back in, that you've got to be able to have health insurance, you've got to be able to afford transportation. Metro cost has gone up rapidly. Because we're in this with Maryland and Virginia, it's always going to be difficult to keep the fares at a reasonable fare. I think that we need to have a transit system that connects our city, and we've got to keep it very affordable. I think $1, and then for certain different groups, whether it be students or for seniors on fixed income, we need to find a way to even bring that cost down. So keep the cost of transit down so you don't have to own a car. Owning a car costs you about $6,000 to $9,000 per year, and that does not fully include the cost of trying to store it, either in a home or on the street, what those costs are. So we have transit that's affordable. We have healthcare that's affordable. We have to have jobs that pay more. We're doing that. Obviously, we have to continue to improve in education. I supported mayoral control of education because after being on the school board, I thought it was failing. And so I worked with Adrian Fenty to say, yep, let's put this under mayoral control. And I'm fighting with everyone else to help. I'm fighting as hard with everyone else to try to be sure that we have a better education system. Certainly we're doing it in Ward 6, and we can do it citywide. So all these things together, we create a net or a basket that has these things in a basket to make the city more affordable. So if we can keep transportation affordable and these other things affordable, and frankly, this was one of the hardest things for me in trying to parse out the Walmart vote. I had met with families at Sursum Corda and the pastor of Mount Airy, with the seniors and the leader of the seniors over there, Von Williams, where they're on fixed income, all around where there's a proposed Walmart over by Georgetown Law School. And this was before the bill was in front of us. This was this one Walmart. And when I talked to Ms. Williams, she said, we get on the bus because we cannot afford to buy food in D.C., so we get on a bus and we go to Walmart. The affordability of our city is an issue. It's not just housing, and it's not just jobs. It's everything together. So when they came in and proposed the Walmart as part of the development, there's a mixed-use development. There would be shops on the first floor, Walmart on the second floor, what we call stick-built housing, which is using 2x4s instead of steel, so it's cheaper, more affordable, of 3 stories above. So you have a mixed income. They didn't want anything from the District of Columbia to build it, and it was a mixed-use development. But what really struck with me in those conversations was the affordability of food. That food often for many folks is not affordable. And that's what this was coming in. So I thought, okay, I can live with this Walmart coming in. Then the bill came through. And I really had to wrestle with the fact that as a corporation, I think it's a horrible corporation. It perpetuates so many bad things, including environmental disasters and such. And I thought that it would be hypocritical to me. That's not the only reason why I didn't support the LRAA bill, but that was the first reason, was affordability of food in the district. Because it's not just how much your housing costs, it's how much your food costs and all these other things. So after
So when you see,
so when that bill came through is why I made every commitment to raise the minimum wage for the whole city. And so we ended up helping the people that work at Walmart, the people that work at Burger King, Cece who works at McDonald's, who would not have been helped by the Walmart bill. We ended up we're going to raise the wage for everyone, but it started with affordability of food for everyone in the city.
So when you see a statistic that shows that the majority of food stamps issued in the district are spent outside of the district, that doesn't surprise you?
Well,
Do you think that's the reason that they're finding more affordable food options? outside of the
Absolutely,
district?
absolutely.
And so how do
They
you?
go to Save-A-Lot, they go to Aldi. That's why I was so excited when we got to Aldi in DC. That Aldi primarily, you know, most of the folks that shop at Aldi's, even though and Aldi's is a great place to shop. I'll plug for them. They're great. But it's people on food stamps. Save-A-Lot, people on food stamps. And you're right, they shop outside of the District of Columbia.
So let me ask you, you talk a lot about your early days as a social worker and following your values and all the good work that you've done for the poor and less fortunate in the District of Columbia. Yet we get to a point where you may be, to a lot of people, better known for the bag fee or bike lanes. And you look at recent polling that shows that you do much better with white affluent voters than you do with poor minority voters. So why do you think that is? Why do you think?
Well, the first thing is, Mark, is that the people that are moving to DC are people that I share their values. Our city is growing again after everybody was leaving in the early 90s. People are moving back to the city, started coming back when they believed again in public service and in urban living. That when Barack Obama was elected, people were excited about government again. You know, Ronald Reagan shamed people that worked for government. That when they said, you know what's wrong with government? Government itself includes you. And we went through years of the Reagan era. And I think even Clinton was a president during the Reagan era because one of his greatest accomplishments was shrinking government. So then we get a new era being brought in by Barack Obama, of where people are excited about public service and about serving, their values. When we look at a lot of these new businesses that are being developed, that social cause is part of that business. When we look at people that are moving here, whether through AmeriCorps and being involved in doing great stuff, I've seen more activism in the district over the past 3 to 5 years than I've seen since I've moved here. And a lot of it is fueled by the young people that are coming in, that are values driven, that want to change DC and want to change the world. And so I believe that it's not just bike lanes. I think that it's a shared value of what we can do with our time on the planet while we're alive.
But why are you not doing better with the people you have spent the majority of your, by your count, who you spent the majority of your career trying to help? And why is it that, because this feeds into the idea that, if it's all these, well-intended people who are moving into the city who identify with you, then is it that the people who have been born and raised here and live here for generations don't identify with you? And why is that your numbers aren't better in that community?
Well, it has forced me to do what I should do, which is I've gone back to reintroduce myself. That I've gone back to, I've been through the churches, through community groups, to talk about who I am and what I started with. And also the vision of the promise to invest in youth. That I believe that we can cut the number of crimes committed by teenagers in half in 2 years with this $100 million investment. Going back into neighborhoods has been a very good thing to do. Ward 6 is half African American, half white. As you know, I won re-election with 75% of the vote. When I was on school board, I represented both wards 5 and 6. And we would not have won without African American votes. So I have had to go back and reintroduce myself with who I am. And I do think that I am identified with new urbanism, with a sustainable city, with all the things that are viewed as sometimes change. And people are threatened by change when so many people are moving in. And so I am identified with, the bag tax we had to try a new paradigm. That's one of the 10 dirtiest rivers in America. It's a symbol of social and environmental injustice. And we had not made much progress at all. So I researched it, tried to figure out a way to clean it up. Now, it's only one piece of the cleanup, but saw that 47% of all the trash that flows into the Anacostia River are plastic bags. 21% in the main stem of the river that doesn't get caught on the bushes, plastic bags. So I did the research, came up with a bill that's win-win. And I knew what I was up against. No one else had passed a bag tax anywhere in America. The only place they first passed it was in Seattle, and it got rescinded turned over by a referendum. So I researched that, and so the first thing I did is I called it the Anacostia Water Cleanup Initiative. So anybody I debated on it, I made them say that. And so then they had to say, but I want to clean up the river, not just this way. And then I went to senior centers all across the city, but mostly in poor communities, because the way they killed the bottle bill was by saying it had a disproportionate impact on seniors. So I went and met with seniors and did a slideshow, and you know what? There's one thing that seniors share. They hate trash. And so they said that they would come testify in the bill. The other thing I did is I brought in the grocery stores and said, tell me about what bags are. So worked with business, worked with both sides of the river. We passed a bill that says that for every penny that's collected, it has to go back to cleaning up the river. So there's no way to lose with the bill. If everybody kept using plastic bags, we'd raise a whole lot of money to clean up the river. If nobody uses plastic bags, there's a lot less you have to clean up. And so that the folks that came in wanted to attack why that was such a bad thing is there's no way that you could lose with the bill. The money raised employs young people across the river who otherwise were not able to get jobs in Anacostia Groundworks program that they work, it put young people to work. And it was a very creative way to deal with a paradigm that we had not been able to deal with before. And that's one of the differences I'll be as mayor. That we will take creative solutions, but there'll be change associated to it. A lot of people are still freaked out by the bag tax, but it works.
At least you're calling it a tax now. And
It doesn't matter.
And not a fee.
It works.
Andy Shallal, we were talking about affordable housing, and I asked him to name some neighborhoods where he thought there was still affordable housing, and he mentioned Capitol Hill. The other night, I believe you were asked this question of Warren, where you live, about the neighborhood where you live, Capitol Hill. And would you tell me, do you think Capitol Hill is still affordable? Do you think there's affordable housing to be had there?
One of the first things I worked on as an ANC commissioner was the Ellen Wilson townhomes. Ellen Wilson was failed public housing. It was dense, dangerous, unsustainable. It was taken to the ground. And so what we built there instead, and the neighbors fought against it, was what we called a limited equity co-op, which means that we built these townhomes back up, which have some one bedroom and whatever, Ellen Wilson townhomes.
I know, because you tell the story.
It's in 3 income bands. So that's affordable. Delta Towers for seniors, that's
You do believe
affordable.
there's affordable housing?
There's more public housing, Ellen Wilson has 3 income tiers, and that's affordable. Kentucky Courts, not far from where you live. As you know, there's affordable housing in Kentucky Courts. We rebuilt Kentucky Courts. There's a lot more that we can do. There's not enough affordable housing in Capitol Hill, but the Hine Junior High project, that will have affordable housing for seniors. We're building affordable housing. We also have public housing. We've got Potomac Gardens, Hopkins, and Kentucky Courts. We've got, so we've got very low income public housing woven into high-end housing and market rate housing. But Ellen Wilson is a very, 3 income tiers, from workforce to 60% of average median income and below, and 30% of average median income below. What I love about Ellen Wilson, it's going to be affordable when we're all dead. It goes on for generations. It's fully owned by the nonprofit corporation. It's not just some tax deal. It is affordable housing forever. And that's the gold standard, is to be able to create affordable housing forever in neighborhoods as they change. There's a lot more that we need to build. I know that we've got a lot of public property that we're looking at developing, and affordable housing has not been the #1 goal for this property. We've got 50 acres over at Reservation 13 on the Anacostia River, over by the DC General site. We've got 26 plus acres at McMillan Reservoir. I don't know how many acres at Walter Reed. 70 acres at Poplar Point. We didn't start by saying, how much affordable housing can we get here? We started by saying, look, let's get a master developer, and then can you add some affordable housing on it? I believe that we can do a whole lot better than that. We have not built any independent living housing buildings for seniors in the past 20 plus years. We're losing workforce housing at a record rate, and I'm not going to go to a campaign spiel, Mark, but I know the cost of a building, when you build an apartment building, 1/3 of the cost is the land. If you want an apartment in DC in a new building, it's anywhere from, about $1,400 a month to $2,200 a month. If you're making $32,000 to $65,000 a year in a job like a teacher or a firefighter, policeman, you're not going to be able to afford that. And so if we can take 1/3 of the cost off the top, right off the bat, we can get down towards the range of $900 to $700 for a unit. And that's one way that we do it, but it has to be the #1 priority in how we deal with these developments. Starting with a master developer that say, could you add some affordable housing on, it's not the way to go.
The red carpet has ended, and we promised people we would give this room back at 9 o'clock. We appreciate you coming out. We want to give you a chance for about a 30-second closing statement for everybody here.
Well, I'm a progressive Democrat. That's why I don't take one dime in corporate dollars. Why does it make a difference? If you believe that your contract and your business is dependent upon what I do as a council member, you're going to give me money. And you're going to give me money through every company you own. There's some people running who say there's no difference between a businessman and a company giving you money. Well, that depends on how many companies you own. Many own multiple limited liability corporations. Many own many standalone restaurants. Every one of them can max out to our campaign. What happened with Vince Gray is a symbol of what's wrong. The largest contractor in the city gave him $650,000. He didn't do it because he loved Vince Gray. He did it to protect his contract. It makes a difference. Now that Jeffrey Thompson, that contractor from Chartered Health, has gone belly up, it's cost him $40 million. It's cost me $40 million. That's $40 million that we could have used for something else. It is a mess when you do that. When we see that Citizens United is corrupting politics across the country, where they say that corporations are people, where the Koch brothers are buying off elections across this country, at home, any Democrat that really cares about the future of politics, the future of our elected government, would not be taking one dime in corporate dollars, and it is corrupting our city. So that's not the only reason I'm running. I'm running to do the things I talked about, new solutions to problems, how we clean up the environment, how we build out the built environment so it works for everyone, so it's affordable, so that we continue to rebuild our schools. I am running on a vision, but the amount of corporate dollars in our election is corrupting our government, and you can see it right in front of you every day. And just the other day, Mark, you saw where one of my colleagues tried to overturn a contract award, and he was trying to do it on behalf, we're growing up as a city because it was over parking fee collection. That's where good corruption always is, that and then road paving. And they had bundled $20,000 to him. And so he was saying, we want to overturn this contract and give them another chance. Of course he did. So we didn't go along with it, but that's why I'm running. I'm running on integrity to have a government that you're proud of, that you'll invest in, that will make this a great city. But also, there's a vision, and I have a vision for the city that includes all of us. Thank you.
We want to thank all of our sponsors, in particular our host, the University District of Columbia Law School, for having us here tonight. Remember March 9th, March 16th. Howie Wells, thanks for coming.
My pleasure.
Thanks very much. Enjoy your snow day tomorrow.
And there's still a lot of food left, so don't make me carry it home on my bicycle. Where is it? Take it with you.